You know that feeling when you're trying to talk to someone you love, and suddenly it feels like you're talking to a wall. No progress, no understanding, just frustration, tension, distance. Let me tell you something most people won't. Every argument that feels like a wall isn't about the issue, it's about what's underneath it. Because when you're arguing, what you're really doing is protecting something. Your pride, your hurt, your fear of not being seen, your deep, aching need to be understood. But here's the truth, most of us were never taught how to disagree with connection. We were taught to defend, attack, withdraw, or win, and that's why every disagreement feels like war, not a conversation. Not a collaboration, a war. Walls go up when we stop listening. They rise when we rush to prove instead of understand. They harden every time we choose being right over being real. So what do? We pause. We breathe. We get honest, not just about the what, but the why. Why did that thing they said sting so badly? Why are you yelling about the dishes when it's really about feeling disrespected? Why do you feel invisible, unheard, dismissed? This isn't about blame, it's about breaking the pattern, and the pattern starts breaking the moment you ask, what am I really trying to say beneath all this anger? Because once you see the wall, you can stop running into it. You can start climbing over it. You can invite the other person to come around it with you. Arguments don't have to be battlefields, they can be breakthroughs, but only if you're willing to stop fighting to win and start fighting to be understood. That's when the wall becomes a door, and all it takes is the courage to knock. Arguments often feel like walls because they're not about the surface issue. It may look like you're fighting about the dishes, or the tone of a text message, or who forgot to call first, but that's rarely the real issue. What you're actually bumping up against is something deeper. Something unspoken, something unresolved. Underneath that sarcastic comment is a feeling of being unseen. Behind that raised voice is a fear of being rejected or dismissed. Every raised eyebrow, every defensive word, every silence that lingers too long, it's not about the surface thing. It's about what that surface thing represents. Because when we argue, we're often not responding to asterisk now asterisk. We're reacting to asterisk before asterisk, to moments where we felt small, to wounds that never fully healed, to patterns we picked up from childhood. That's why arguments can feel so intense, so disproportionate. They're charged with emotional weight we don't even realize we're carrying. It's not just you didn't text me back. It's I feel like I don't matter. It's not you always leave your mess. It's I'm tired of being the only one who cares. The words we say in an argument are often just the smoke, but the fire, the real fire, is deeper, and because we're not taught to look at that fire, we keep blowing at the smoke. We focus on being right, we focus on winning, we throw up walls instead of building bridges, and then we wonder why we feel alone, even in relationships that are supposed to be close. Why we feel misunderstood, even when we speak clearly. It's because we're speaking from the surface, and healing doesn't happen there. Connection doesn't happen there. If we want to change the way we argue, we have to look at what the argument is really about. Not just what was said, but what was asterisk felt asterisk. Not just the action, but the meaning behind it. That's when the wall starts to crack, not from shouting louder, but from understanding deeper. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can say in an argument isn't a comeback. It's, hey, what's really going on here? That's when you stop hitting the wall and start opening a door. People argue to protect deeper emotions, hurt, fear, pride. Most of the time, we don't even realize we're doing it. We think we're just defending a point, correcting a mistake, setting the record straight. But beneath that sharp tone or cold silence, there's something fragile we're guarding. Because underneath every argument, there's something personal at stake. It's not just about being right. It's about not being rejected. It's not just about proving a fact. It's about proving that you matter, that your voice deserves to be heard, that you're not invisible. Sometimes we raise our voices because we don't know how else to say I'm hurting. We throw accusations when we don't feel safe enough to say I feel abandoned. We become defensive, not because we don't care, but because we care too much. And we're terrified of being vulnerable. Arguments become armor. Words become shields, because showing the real emotion underneath, that feels too risky, too exposed. So instead of saying, I'm scared you'll leave, we say, you never listen. Instead of saying, I feel like I'm not good enough, we say, you always criticize me. And just like that, a moment that could be intimate turns into a battlefield. One person tries to protect their pride. The other tries to protect their pain. Both walk away feeling misunderstood. Because here's the truth we often forget: we don't argue just to express ourselves. We argue to protect something we haven't fully dealt with. Maybe it's old rejection. Maybe it's fear of being powerless. Maybe it's pride that was built as a survival tool when we felt ignored. But whatever it is, it doesn't go away just because you shout louder. In fact, the more you argue from that place, the more disconnected you feel. Because you're not really fighting each other, you're fighting your own emotional past, your own unspoken needs, your own fear of not being safe in love. And unless we start noticing that, unless we start saying the thing asterisk beneath asterisk, the thing will keep turning every disagreement into a war. And keep walking away with our emotions more protected, but our relationships more wounded. Most of us were never taught how to argue with empathy or connection. We were taught how to win, how to defend, how to shut down, or how to walk away. We saw arguments as power struggles, not opportunities for understanding. We learned that raising your voice means control, that silence means strength, that whoever talks last or loudest wins. But no one wins in disconnection, and yet that's where we end up again and again. We mimic what we saw growing up. We replay dynamics we never questioned: parents yelling, doors slamming, tears in secret. Or worse, nothing at all, just tension, just avoidance, just pretending everything's fine when it clearly isn't. So when we get into relationships, real ones, messy ones, we bring that same survival playbook. We argue to be right, not to be real. We listen to reply, not to understand. We throw words like weapons, not knowing how deeply they cut, because no one showed us how to pause, how to breathe, how to say, this is what I feel, instead of this is what you did. No one told us that arguing can be vulnerable, that it's okay to cry in the middle of a disagreement, that it's okay to say, I don't know how to express this, but I need you to hear me. Instead, we learned to armor up, to prepare for battle, to build walls before anyone gets the chance to hurt us. But here's what most of us are craving: not a partner who agrees with us all the time, but one who stays emotionally present, even when things get hard. Someone who doesn't shut down when they're upset. Someone who doesn't turn pain into punishment. But how do you become that person? If you were never shown how, you start by unlearning, by noticing the way your body tenses when you feel attacked, by catching the urge to interrupt, by sitting with the discomfort of hearing something you don't like, and choosing not to fire back. You start small. You practice empathy not as a strategy, but as a way of being. You remind yourself, this isn't about winning, this is about understanding, this is about connection, and connection, real connection, requires a different kind of strength, one that doesn't raise its voice, one that listens even when it's hard, one that says, let's get through this together, and not I'm done. That's how we start learning, how we start changing, how we turn conflict into closeness, even when no one ever showed us how. Fighting to win creates distance. Fighting to understand creates closeness. It sounds simple, but in the heat of the moment, we forget. We forget that the person in front of us is not our enemy. We forget that we're not in a courtroom. We're in a relationship, and relationships aren't about winning. They're about staying connected, especially when it's hard. But when emotions run high, winning feels good. It feels like control. It feels like safety. So we go there, we raise our voice, we interrupt, we pick apart words, we gather evidence like a lawyer building a case, and for a moment we feel powerful. But at what cost? We might win the argument. But we lose the connection, we lose the softness, we lose the trust, because when one person wins, the other feels defeated, and no one wants to feel small in a relationship. No one wants to feel like they're constantly under attack. Even if the words are sharp, the wound runs deeper. It becomes, you don't get me, you don't care how I feel, I can't be myself around you, and that's where the distance starts. It doesn't begin with yelling. It begins with not feeling safe. It begins with the subtle message that your feelings are just obstacles in my way to being right. But fighting to understand that changes everything. It means putting your ego down long enough to say, help me see what you're feeling. It means asking, not assuming, listening, not reacting, being curious instead of being clever. It's choosing to hear the pain behind the words, not just the words themselves. It's saying, this matters to me because you matter to me. That kind of fighting doesn't push people away. It pulls them closer. It creates space for honesty. It makes room for healing because people don't want to be fixed. They want to be felt. They want to be seen in their struggle, not silenced by it. And when someone feels understood, something powerful happens. The defenses drop, the anger softens, the conversation shifts. You stop being on opposite sides and start sitting on the same one. That's where real resolution lives. Not in who's right, but in who's real. Not in the loudest voice, but in the most open heart. Because love doesn't grow where there's victory. It grows where there's vulnerability. And understanding is the bridge. Not the end of the fight, but the beginning of something better. Walls go up when people feel unseen, unheard, or misunderstood. It doesn't always happen in an explosion. Sometimes it's quiet. It starts with a sigh. A look away, a conversation that dies mid-sentence because the other person wasn't really listening. Little moments add up, a comment dismissed, a feeling invalidated, a truth ignored, and slowly a wall begins to rise. Not made of bricks, but of silence, of withdrawal, of hesitation. It's not about being dramatic, it's about self-protection. When someone doesn't feel safe expressing themselves, they stop trying, they pull back. Not because they don't care, but because they've learned it doesn't matter. They've learned that speaking up means conflict, that vulnerability gets punished, not met with kindness, that their needs are too much. Their emotions are inconvenient, and so they build a wall. It's not there to shut you out. It's there to keep them from breaking, to survive the disappointment, to manage the pain, because being open in a space that doesn't honor your truth that hurts more than being alone. And yet, we often miss the signs. We think someone's distant, cold, detached, but what we're really seeing is someone who's tired of not being heard, someone who has given up trying to be understood. And the longer that wall stands, the harder it becomes to break down, because with every day, it gets thicker. With every missed opportunity to listen, it gets taller. But here's what we need to remember: walls don't go up because people want to disconnect. They go up because people wanted connection and didn't get it. They go up because at some point, someone felt invisible. They go up because it felt safer to protect than to risk again. And when you see that, really see it, everything changes. You stop taking the distance personally. You start asking better questions. You become curious instead of defensive. And sometimes just showing up and saying, I want to understand you, is enough to begin lowering that wall. Not immediately, not all at once, but piece by piece, because people aren't asking for perfection. They're asking to be seen. They're asking for presence, to be heard without judgment, to be understood without being fixed. That's how you reach through the wall, not by force, but with gentleness, with consistency, with the kind of attention that says, I'm here, you matter. I want to understand. And maybe that's what we all need most, not someone who always agrees with us. Not someone who always has the perfect words, but someone who stays, someone who leans in when it would be easier to pull away, someone who says, I see you, when we feel invisible, because the walls we build were never meant to last forever. They were built out of pain, but they can be taken down with love, one moment of understanding at a time, one brave, honest conversation at a time. And if you're willing to meet people where they are, if you're willing to listen deeper than their words, you won't just break the wall. You'll build something stronger in its place, a connection that can hold both your truths. And that is where healing begins.